Hi, good afternoon. This is Mrs. Capizzi, and I'm here with some more examples for long division using the standard algorithm. So we were working more today using our acronym, Does McDonald's Serve Cheeseburgers? Where the D stands for divide, the M stands for multiply, the S is for subtract, the CH is for check, and the B is for bring down or bring up the remainder. And I just want to go over some quick vocabulary. When you have a division bar, the number inside is called the dividend. The number you're dividing by is called the divisor, and the answer you get that goes on top is called the quotient. So off to the side, I'm going to write my steps to check off. D, divide, M, multiply, S, subtract, CH, check, and B, bring down. Does McDonald's serve cheeseburgers? So the first thing I'm going to look at is, I'm going to move my multiplication chart over here. I see my divisor is 6. So if you are using a multiplication chart, you're going to use the row that has 6 in it. So first I look at the first number. 7's more than 6, so that I know that I can divide, and that only goes in one time. So if I go across my 6's, 6 times 1 is 6, 6 times 2 is 12, which is too much. So I just divided. Now I'm going to multiply. 1 times 6 is 6. Now I will subtract. 7 minus 6 is 1. Check that off. Then I'm going to check to make sure that 1 is less than 6, and it is. So now I can bring down my next digit. So I'll check that off. Now I've got 19 divided by 6. So if I go across my 6's, the closest I can get to 19 without going over is 18. And if I read up, that goes in 3 times. And I was emphasizing in class, when you read up, it's the top of the multiplication chart. The number that's on top here goes on top here. So it goes in 3 times. So I just divided. Now I'm going to multiply. 3 times 6 is 18. Check that off. Now I'll subtract. 9 minus 8 is 1. I check to make sure 1 is less than 6, and it is. So now I can bring down my last digit, which is 8. So now I've got 18 divided by 6, and if I read over, I can get that exact number. So if I read up, it tells me how many times. The 3 is on top, so it goes on top here. 3 times 6 is 18, and 18 minus 18 is 0. So there is no remainder. So I did check, and I did bring down. So let's try one more 3-digit by 1-digit example. And again, I will write my steps off to the side. Does McDonald's serve cheeseburgers? Divide, multiply, subtract, check, and bring down. I did give all the students a copy, a black and white copy for them to take home in case they wanted to use it for their homework. So now I have the situation where I look at the first digit. 1 is less than 4, so I can't divide it. So I'm just going to put an X above there so I know that I can't use that place value, and I'm going to have to use 2 place values. So then I've got 12 divided by 4. So I go across my 4's, and I can get exactly to 12. So I read up. That tells me how many times it goes in. It goes in 3 times. So that goes up top here. So I divided. Now I will multiply. 3 times 4 is 12. 12 minus 12 is 0. So I did my subtraction. Now I'm not done yet because 0 is less than 4, so I can check that. But I have another digit to bring down, the 8. So you don't really need the 0 here because you don't write 8 as 0, 8. So I'm just going to cross that off. So now I've got 8 divided by 4, and I can see if I go over to 8 and I read up, that tells me how many times it goes in. So that's on top, so I write the 2 on top of here. 2 times 4 is 8, and 8 minus 8 is 0. So if you want to try these two, 744 divided by 4 and 732 divided by 4, go ahead. You should not get a remainder. So if you do those at home and you want to bring them into class and show me tomorrow, that would be great. Now I'm going to do a couple examples of a 4-digit by a 1-digit. So let me switch out my paper. And it's really the same process, you just have maybe a couple extra steps. So again, I'm going to use the steps in my cheeseburger: divide, multiply, subtract, check, and bring down or bring up the remainder at the end. So here I've got 5,364 divided by 4. So the first thing I'm going to do is write my steps off to the side. Does McDonald's serve cheeseburgers? And the first thing I'll do is divide. So I look at the first digit, and 5 is more than 4, so I know I can divide it, and that's only going to go in one time. 1 times 4 is 4, so I divided, I multiplied, now I will subtract. 5 minus 4 is 1. I check to make sure 1 is less than my divisor of 4, and then I can bring down the next digit. So I go across my 4s, and the closest I can get to 13 without going over is 12, and I read up, and I see that is 3 times. So just like that's on the top of the multiplication chart, that goes on the top of the division bar. So I divided, now I'm going to multiply. 3 times 4 is 12. Now I subtract. 13 minus 12 is 1. I check to make sure 1 is less than 4. And now I can bring down my next digit, which is 6. Now I've got 16 divided by 4. So if I go over to my 4s, I can get exactly 16, and I read up to tell me how many times. So the 4 is on top, so I put the 4 on top here. So I divided, now I will multiply. 4 times 4 is 16. Now I will subtract. 16 minus 16 is 0. But I'm not done because 0 is less than 4, so I can check that off. But I do have another digit to bring down. So again, I don't need to worry about this 0, and I've got 4 divided by 4, and 4 divided by 4 equals 1. So that goes in one time. Then 1 times 4, when I multiply, is 4. I'll subtract. 4 minus 4 is 0, and 0 is less than 4. There's no other digits to bring down, and there's no remainder to bring up. So I am done. So 5,364 divided by 4 gives me a quotient of 1,341. And I'll do one more example here. Does McDonald's serve cheeseburgers? Divide, multiply, subtract, check, bring down. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at my first digit. 5 is more than 2, so I know I can divide it. And I go across my 2's. The closest I can get to 5 without going over is 4. So I read up, and it tells me how many times it goes in. It goes in 2 times. So now I will multiply. 2 times 2 is 4. Now I'll subtract. 5 minus 4 is 1. I check to make sure 1 is less than 2. It is. So now I can bring down the 5, which is my next digit. Now I go back up to the top. Now I'm dividing. 15 divided by 2. So again, I go across my 2's, and the closest I can get to 15 without going over is 14. I read up, and it tells me how many times it goes in. It goes in 7 times. So now I will multiply. 7 times 2 is 14. And now I will subtract. 15 minus 14 is 1. 1 is less than 2, so I can check this off. And now I bring down my next digit. So now I have 18 divided by 2, and I know that 2 times 9 gets me exactly 18. So 2 times 9 gives me exactly 18. So 9 goes on top. Now I multiply. 9 times 2 is 18. And now I subtract, and 18 minus 18 is 0. But be careful here. You're not done because you still have another digit to bring down. So here I'm going to bring down the 3. And the closest I can get is 2 times 1, because 2 times 2 is 4, and that's too much. So it goes in one time. So then I'm going to multiply. 1 times 2 is 2. And again, I don't need this 0 here, so I'll cross that off. And then I'm going to subtract. 3 minus 2 is 1. So 1 is less than 2, so I can check that off. I don't have any more digits to bring down, but I do have a remainder to bring up. So 5,583 divided by 2 gives me a quotient of 2,791, remainder 1. And if you'd like to try this one at home and bring it in for me to check, that would be fantastic. I hope this helps. Have a great afternoon.